Welcome to our final lecture on communication and media relations in sport. We are going to briefly look at social issues in sport communication as well as legal issues in sport communications. This is going to be a very short lecture because it is once again largely interactive and without a an active class. It's just going to be a monologue and we'll go very quickly. So one of the social issues that we need to consider in sport communication is race and ethnicity. Perhaps race is not particularly big or of much concern in a country like Zimbabwe, where we are largely of the same race. However, it is quite a big concern in other countries and in multiracial um, institutions. Sport, likewise, is a global industry and therefore also does face a lot of race and ethnical concerns. For example, most recently, the English players were attacked online because of their loss in the finals of the Europa um, League. That was not a very positive image that came from their country. However, that shows how race can be manipulated or can be used for discrimination in sport communication. So had the communication managers for the British team not handled the situation correctly, we might have had a bigger issue. But they were very quick to defend their players and to speak out against racism and the discrimination that was going on online. So that is one example of how sport communication can be affected by race and ethnicity. There are three challenges that I have identified there that are related to race and ethnicity in sport. Okay, but these ones have to do with other issues rather than just communication and include eliminating racial and ethnical exclusion in sport participation, managing racial and ethnic diversity by creating an inclusive culture in sport. For example, accepting the fact that um, Muslim cultures will not allow for attire that will reveal a lot of skin. So we need to be inclusive in our sport culture and understand that their culture does not accept that. Integrating different races and ethnic groups in positions of power in sport. That's a very touchy one, actually, and quite, I think, controversial in sport because we do know that sport is largely male dominated. And for the most part, there are white people in the positions of power in sport organizations. But I won't touch that with the 10-foot pole, and I'll leave you to debate that. So what are some influence of sociocultural issues in sport? So what influences sport? Okay, the sport that you will likely play, sport that you would likely engage in or consume, support, interact with. So those are some of the sociocultural issues that influence sport. Okay, culture. For the most part, I think it's basically accepted that Black people enjoy basketball more than white people do. But we have a picture there at the bottom that shows us otherwise. Family background. I grew up in a house where my father enjoyed watching football and cricket and those other sports that I gravitate towards the most, although I do enjoy a lot more other sports. For example, my mom loved tennis, so we do tend to watch a lot of tennis as well. Religion. There are some religions, like I said before, that will not allow for or appreciate sports where you have to show a lot of skin or where a lot of skin is inevitably shown. And therefore, people within that religion might not be exposed or likely to support or expose themselves to sport codes that are adverse to their religious beliefs. Your peer grouping and, of course, gender will also influence the type of sport that you engage with. All right, so let's talk about gender. And those are all questions that I would have loved us to have an interaction about. Do you think there is a difference in the coverage of male versus female sport? How about male versus female sport broadcasters? What are the possible reasons, and how can sport professionals address this issue? I think we can take this to the group, and I suppose it could be a very interesting and very stimulating conversation. It's quite relevant because we need to know as sport practitioners what to expect in the field of sport media. So is there a difference in the coverage of male versus female sport? I would say yes. If you look at the way that people will focus on the male side of the FIFA World Cup, that's very relevant because it's happening now. And the way that the female World Cup will be more likely ignored in preparation for the next event. Not to take it too far, how many of us were actually aware of the female Africa Cup of Nations going on after the male Africa Cup of Nations? There was hardly any coverage of the female element of that big tournament, which is quite disappointing. And how about male versus female sport broadcasters? Most recently, I have seen about 2 or 3 female sport broadcasters, and I think they are starting to also incorporate some female figures in male-dominated sports like football, but I still feel that it's largely male-dominated, and female practitioners in the same market are less recognizable, which is quite sad. And what do you think are the possible reasons? Could be history, could be culture, could be any number of reasons. And how can sport professionals address this issue? Like I said, I think we need to take this up in the group. It will make for a very fascinating conversation. So let's talk about nationalism and sport media. Okay, so what is nationalism? Nationalism is the identity of your national, okay, let me put it differently. Nationalism is how one person recognizes themselves in relation to their nation. Okay, so for example, I am a Zimbabwean national. So that is my nationality. I love my country. Okay, that is nationalism. So sport provides an opportunity for nations to compete against each other, which is quite interesting because in most instances it's different clubs or institutions within the same nation that compete against each other. But then sport will provide an opportunity for nations to actually put up their experts against each other. Sport has sometimes been used as a tool for diplomacy. For example, I've said the Winter Olympics of 2018, which for the first time in over 30 years, the North and South Korea walked in, marched into the stadium as one country, which was a very big political move for those Olympics. Similarly, Olympics, not just the Olympics, but many events have been used as a way to change or to reinforce some national branding. And we can find a lot of articles on that. Perhaps we can take that into group discussion as well, because I feel like it's quite important. South Africa made a statement in 1996 when they had been re-entered into international sport, not only just winning the Rugby World Cup, but having the first Black president lift the cup with the white team. All right, sport reinforces national identity, thus national pride. And do you think nationality causes bias in sport media? Let's say, for example, we are watching the World Cup. Do you think the commentary you will hear in your country will be the same as the commentary that you will hear in another country? Or would it be different? Will there be perspectives that change because of the nationality and so on? Right, so let's move on to legal issues, and there's not much really that we need to discuss here. Right, so let's talk about freedom of the press. Freedom of the press or freedom of the media is a fundamental principle. And in this principle, it's stated that communication and expression through various media, including printed, blah, 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 should be considered a right to be exercised freely. So that means the Constitution allows for the media to express themselves freely without any means of stopping them. But we have something that then counters that: privacy rights. Unfortunately, professional and amateur athletes are considered public figures. Now, if you think about it, private figures or private individuals, members of the public, cannot how am I phrasing this? Okay, so private individuals or members of the public have the right to say no to media publishing information about them or their pictures or anything that they are not happy with that relates to them or affects them or influences their life in any way. So the media then has their right or their freedom of press curbed in that respect. However, because athletes are considered public figures, their lives are viewed as public. So they receive constant exposure, and the press has the right to report on matters that they feel are of public interest, and that can be anything from their home life, their private life, to their work, and so on. So what are your thoughts about this? Do you think this is fair on athletes? Do you think they should be considered public figures? I mean, they didn't choose to become public figures. They wanted to just play sport and get paid for it, and that's what they do. So do you think the celebrity status is part and parcel of something that they should expect? I don't know. The right of publicity is the right of an individual to control commercial value and exploitation of their name, their likeness, and prevent others from appropriating the value of their commercial benefit. So this is the only part of their public lives that they can control. So articles can be published about them. Anything can be said and done about them. However, their faces, their names, their brand cannot be used to make money in any way. Right, so from there, we then come right down to the copyright and trademark laws. So the copyright law protects the rights of owners, of property owners, and therefore people cannot reproduce those products and so on. I'm sure you know that you have to pay TV rights in order to be able to broadcast something. And if you do not pay that broadcast rights, you cannot broadcast whatever event it is that you would like to. For example, on YouTube, if you are not licensed or you're not whitewashed or white labeled to produce something or to produce a video on certain content, then it will be taken down because you are infringing on the copyright law. So copyright law is quite important and believes in the fair use doctrine. Trademark law similarly protects trademarks, service marks, and collective marks. So I cannot use Coca-Cola brand to make money because it's not my brand. So I can't use that mark. I cannot use their colors or any of their patterns or anything. Right, and that's it. So like I said, this was a very, very short lecture, and it is the last lecture in our series of lectures. If there are any concerns or any questions, post, we will have to then take it up in the group. I expect to start receiving assignments quite soon, and I'm looking forward to